The Win 4 may not be my first GPD device, but it definitely is a first. You might be surprised to know it's not necessarily my favorite handheld, but it is the absolute most blueprint that makes me understand what that device could look like. As to if it is the best gaming handheld, this video will hopefully help you determine if that is the case for you. Hi, I'm Clef and you're watching GameTechTalk. But first, specs are in order. I invite you to return to these slides after watching this video. I also take this opportunity to inform you that this review is built using the 2022 model, but will address differences between each variant. This review focuses on the experience that this device offers as a whole more than actual benchmarks. Nonetheless, we will address performance later on. I'm hoping these on-screen slides will help you evaluate the kind of power between chips and what type of flexibility is overall achievable towards your own gaming ventures. Let's start with what to expect from the shell and body of the Win 4. For starters, you'll find a 6-inch 1080p 60Hz IPS panel that also allows 45Hz locked. While the ED-ID can be adjusted manually with the right know-how and the right tools, it can cause severe damage. Therefore, having it set beforehand by the manufacturer is ideal, and locking at 45Hz can be beneficial, especially in a gaming handheld PC that needs to squeeze every FPS possible. You'll find a full array of game-dedicated inputs, such as your phase button, shoulder buttons, etc. Additionally, the triggers are analog and can register gradual values, often considered a must-have when playing racing games. As is now familiar with every recent GPD Windows-based PC, you'll also find user-programmable buttons on the back of the device. These buttons can be used to record short macros or replicate inputs. They also provide software to let us program them as we see fit. For example, to replace L3 and R3, it can also be used for combination shortcuts like Alt-Tab or Ctrl-Left-Shift-Escape. The choice is ours. One of the things that makes the Win 4 an absolute wonder and something you won't know you'll miss until you do is a hidden keyboard under its panel. It features about the same functions as a TKL-sized one. While the screen is 10-point touch compatible, you can also use the dedicated nub at the bottom right as a mouse, which also serves as a button, short press for left click and long press for right click. And then the usual power button, volume button, a 3.5mm jack, a micro SD, two USB-Cs, one up top, one at the bottom, both capable of USB 4 speeds with video out and eGPU support, and thanks to GPD, one USB-A 3.2 Gen 2 at the top. It's always mesmerizing to see just how much GPD can pack on their device. I don't think there is one manufacturer out there that can fit as much in the gaming handheld space, at least this consistently. But one thing that deserves specific attention is the GPD signature gamepad mouse mode switch. It transforms gamepad inputs from a hardware perceived level for Windows into keyboard plus mouse values, which so happens to have become user customizable for some time. I specify hardware level because essentially these buttons will never get stuck behind the Windows administrator pop-up. For example, a game won't be able to refuse your inputs as well, whereas sometimes software-based solution can get stuck behind anti-cheat engines, amongst other things. For example, when switching to keyboard mouse mode, my right analog becomes a mouse, L1 is left click, and R1 becomes right click. R2 gives an acceleration to your mouse cursor while being held. Missing from the 2022 model versus the 2023 is Oculink. Oculink is a connection quickly gaining massive attention due to its bandwidth and speed capabilities, as it provides direct access to PCI lanes, specifically for X in this device. USB 4 protocol peaks at 40 gigabits bandwidth, whereas Oculink does up to 63 gigabits. That's what I call a massive difference. While 4X PCI lanes are not as fast in transfer rates as 60x PCIe found on modern PCs, it still performs exceptionally well by today's standards, so you could find yourself leaving as little as 5% performance loss on even the top tier most GPUs available today. In comparison, using an eGPU through USB-C will net you a much more significant loss in performance. For example, referring to the last benchmark I ran, I recorded a 37% loss average using a 3090 and a 17% loss average using a 1660 Super. Let me tell you, it never feels good to leave so much raw power on the table, but fear not, as I know what will make you feel better. They say the best therapy is being excellent to someone. I definitely appreciate if you could hit the like button and leave a comment to help this video get more exposure. If by the end you feel like you'd want to hang around some more, you know what to do. By now, you understand that this handheld has the absolute most in terms of options for navigating your operating system, and that the best part is customization, allowing you to make it your own based on your preferences and what would feel more natural to you. The L1, R1 keys also have RGB accents, but I'd be remiss if I didn't address how faint the feature is in comparison to the LED rings you'll find on devices such as the Rogue Ally, the One X Fly, or Ioneo 2S. As they say, RGB is the absolute endgame for any gamer serious with their skills, so if you'd click away from this video, having now been provided this information, I would understand. But in the event that you are willing to make the absolute most compromise, the rest is smooth sailing from here, or almost. The device is capable of up to 65 watt charging speeds, giving you from 0 to 100 within more or less 45 minutes with the included charger. Depending on your total draw, 1 hour of battery time should be achievable in nearly every scenario from 100%, but with the device pushed to the absolute maximum, that might be all the time you have. Of course, with the flexibility these devices offer, you could also lower TDP to save battery life and fall over the edge of 2 hours or more, always depending on just how low you're willing to go. While the obvious difference between 2022 and 2023 models is the APU, do keep in mind that the 2022 was bundled with LPDDR5 64 mega transfer RAM speeds, while 2023 models are paired with LPDDR5X 7500 MT speeds, which should result in a nice bump in stability and for handling gaming performance as well, especially for emulation. The Ryzen 6800 APU is specific to the 2022 model, but if you opt for the 2023, it's available in both the 7640U and the 7840U. Both options are undoubtedly an upgrade over their predecessor. The 7840U offers more performance, but in both cases, don't expect to have double or even 50% growth in performance over its last generation. In comparison, the 7640U should net you an uplift of 5 to 10% versus the 6800U, whereas the 7840U should give you another extra 5 to 10% on top of that. Of course, you'll find scenarios where the differences are less and sometimes more, but these numbers should provide reasonable expectations in many case scenarios. In short, while it is not negligible, it also shouldn't be FOMO-inducing for owners of 6800U devices. Also, because 760 and 780M, as I understand it, have different drivers instructions versus the 680M, the word out there is that drivers are not yet as mature and that we could see a bump in performance when that has been fully addressed by AMD. Seeing how Lies of P performed better on the 6800U, I would believe that drivers are indeed not fully optimized yet, but when it will, we might see a large bump in performance versus the current best case scenario out there. As for productivity purposes, you would also expect an uplift, but truth be told, CPUs on these devices are already so impressive to begin with that most differences would be experienced in extremely heavy usage scenarios or benchmark, but for everyday mild usage, it should be similar enough. So what does gaming on this device feels like? Well, it's for the most part nothing short of awesome, but flawless is not a word I'd use to describe it. Now, I am a glass half full kind of guy, but I expect people who are not to still see the GPD Win 4 as one very impressive and very capable gaming PC. When it was first announced, it also introduced a shockingly reasonable price, and if I reviewed it then, I'd tell you that it's a killer handheld and one of the best there is. And the thing is, it's still worthy of such title and still has many things that its competitors can envy it for. And it doesn't stop there. The things it does greater than most, it really nails, like the addition of a keyboard, which for me is a must-have, the great variety of inputs for navigation, and the flexibility that GPD provides with their software. Those quality of life features could seem guaranteed elsewhere, but take it from someone who owns way too many of these handhelds. It's not as clear-cut as one would think. So in that regard, GPD is a step above everything out there. Yes, including everyone's favorite, the Steam Deck. While I don't expect to grab this unit myself, the AYANEO Slide should prove to be a worthy competitor and one of the few devices to have a very thorough quality of life approach with its DNA, if done right, of course. But just as well, now more than ever, other devices have a lot of things that, dare I say, do better than the Win 4, and this is the part of the review where I feel my stomach churning a bit. Because as much as I love the GPD Win 4, and as much as I want to praise it for all the things it does so well, the landscape of handhelds is so fierce and so diverse that as far as gaming goes, the main thing that it technically is designed for, there is much to love, but there are also areas of improvement as well. Now, I don't want to make this video about other devices because that's not the goal. Plus, you'll stick around to see those devices when I release videos about them, right? But when holding a Rogue Ally, a Steam Deck, a One X Fly, a device that caught me by major surprise that I'll be reviewing shortly, it also makes it extremely obvious how superior they are when the sole purpose is gaming. Something about the way they feel when clocking hours in bed on a well-deserved lazy Sunday. One thing the Win 4 excels at though is the D-pad. It feels amazing and is essentially as silent as it gets, and yet retains exceptional reliability, responsiveness, and overall feel. Of all the PC handhelds out there that I've tested, this one takes the crown for fighters and retro emulation. Yes, that is even despite its D-pad being under the analog stick. The sound coming out of the front-facing speakers is decent. It's actually better balanced than many competing devices out there, but the range is lacking. The clarity is not quite up there in high and colorful tones, and the full-bodied bass sounds we all appreciate also didn't receive their invitation to this party. But overall, everything in between sounds good enough without necessarily standing out in any particular way. Talking about sound, the fan noise, even when ramped up all the way, is also not too loud. That is one area where GPD flexed their engineering skills. I have not heard any particular high-pitch whine, and the decibel peak is amongst the best I've seen. I would say it's easily on par with Steam Deck and Rogue Ally. I'm not trying to tell you you won't hear the fans, you will, but it's also another aspect where this device, compared to many, comes out overall better than most I've run into in the last year. And it also does a fantastic job at getting the heat out of the handheld without causing any discomfort to the extremities where your hand should be holding the device. Sure, the screen can get warm from time to time, same goes with the backside, but your hands also wouldn't be resting there for a long duration, so not to worry, as it is doing what it should, which is dissipating heat out of its body. One wish I have is that this gaming portable PC would dissipate more of that RGB feature. And sure, we've been making jokes at RGB's expense for years, but yes, I admit it, having those LED rings shine bright with color phasing through gives our devices a little je ne sais quoi that will make them stand out. While GPD gave this 4-time flagship iteration some of the RGB goodness, it's underwhelming for the most part, to the point that I question if it should even be there. Even in the darkest of rooms, those shoulder buttons just look sad. The Win 4 is comfortable enough though, but the ergonomics are not groundbreaking. The weight dispersion is a huge, no pun intended, success on this device though. So clocking in for long duration gaming sessions is not hard at all, but that is another area where the competition have come up with considerably stronger offerings since. That is also probably one of the most subjective aspects of these gaming handhelds, so your opinion may completely differ. One thing that do make me unsure if I'd want to change though is that I'm not convinced that they could achieve better without sacrificing the overall footprint of the device. Something to think about. As for those analogs, they are decent, better than Joy-Cons for sure, but it's also not those large sticks you'd find on the AYANEO 2S in Geek. From a software end of things, it's all fine and dandy. GPD have their tech figured out for quite some time. I'm referring more to the size of the sticks, which are similar to Joy-Cons, yet with a flatter design that still retains a convex shape. The fact they are more elevated do make them more pleasant overall, which I like. As we conclude this video, GPD paved the way with some mind-blowing prices when they introduced the Win for 2022, and not a penny will feel wasted on this device. In fact, you'll put it down feeling as though you got your money's worth and then some compared to many of its competition, but still, I'd sometimes want to say it's a jack of all trades and master of none. But then I quickly remind myself that it simply wouldn't be fair to say as such. Definitely, the Win 4 is master at many things, just not everything. And in reality, everything it does good enough is easily bested by many of the options you can find nowadays. But then, how many other players in the space gives us as much as GPD persistently does? Well, the Win 4 is no exception, and very much a standalone device and a myriad of slightly different handheld PCs. As for the 2022 or 2023 models, if you were to find a 2022 for a sizable discount, say between $150 to $200, I'd argue to go for that one instead. Of course, that's for you to decide. As for myself, I still am absolutely flabbergasted at just how much of a jump that GPD did with the Win 4 versus the Win 3. When it was first released, I had a hard time understanding how they could make it any better. I love how it has an identity of its own. I adore how this Vita successor inspires me to experience with handheld PC so differently. But GPD, and I hope you won't hold it against me that deep down I'm hoping the Win 5 will find a better balance between an all-around, all-inclusive device and a gaming-centric one. Just like lifelong relationships, compromises are a necessity, and this reminds me that just like my wife and I, perfection wouldn't exist without it. With that thought in mind, GPD produced one of the closest devices to ever be what I'd consider the perfect gaming handheld. And who knows, maybe the next one will be, but until then, it's pretty hard to beat. But if you were looking for the perfect video, well, much like this device, I haven't made that one yet. But I did make this one going over why I think Apple is not letting USB-C gamepads work on the new iPhone 15. It can make you clench your teeth, but I definitely think it's worth a watch. See you there.